What an amazing job Chris did, didn't he? Round of applause. So I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off right about now. So Melissa, please kind of go someplace else. I'm going to mess with our logistics people that have planned this entire event. I'm going to go off script. 6 years ago, we came up with this idea for Always On. We didn't really know where it was going to go. We wanted to create this event that was kind of the intersection between business, leadership, and technology. We wanted to find that sweet spot that we could sit in that was just different than what other people were talking about. So we put this thing together. We thought about it for a number of months. We talked about it. But the first Always On, we basically said on December 6th, we're doing this, and we're doing it by the end of January. On January 27th, we launched our first Always On, and we had about 150 people in attendance, which about 50 of them were Atreon employees. So we actually had a very good, solid event. And at that point in time, we realized that we were onto something. We wanted to create something truly amazing. When I envisioned what we wanted to do with Always On, I never envisioned it being this. For this event here, we have over 800 people that registered for the event. Throughout the day, we'll probably have over 700, 720 people that will be actually physically here. It's been truly amazing. So when I look out at this audience, I'm just overwhelmed with this kind of satisfaction that what we've been able to create that creates such buzz and such energy. On my wrist here, I have a bracelet that I was given by a friend of mine at the holiday time period. And this bracelet is a special bracelet in the fact that it has two beads on it that are different colors. One is a white bead and one is a black bead. The black bead actually has mud from the Dead Sea inside the bead itself. The white bead has water from the Himalayas. And what this bracelet represents is that in life there are highs and lows. And that what exists between the two of them, one is that it's to be humble. And the second is to be hopeful. So from my perspective today, when I look at this, I'm humbled by what you guys have helped us create. And I'm hopeful that we can continue this amazing experience that we've been on for the last 28 years, and with the Always On and what Atreon's done for the rest of our lives. So thank you very much for your help in making this a reality. So round of applause to you guys. So now I'll go back on script, and hopefully I won't mess up the schedule too badly. So in his introduction, I think Chris did a fantastic job defining culture. So I won't bore you with the details of restating and redefining culture. But what I want to do is I want to start with how culture has influenced Atreon and me over the last few years. I remember when we started Atreon all those years ago. If you asked me about culture, I wouldn't have had an opinion. I never really thought about culture. It wasn't part of my vocabulary. It wasn't something I thought about. It wasn't something I put a lot of emphasis on. It just wasn't part of what we did. Some people in the room may have remembered us back in those early days. We were slightly a different company. We were focused on the bottom line. How are we going to increase sales? How are we going to increase profit? We focused on the bottom line. We also focused on things like, what's our business model going to be? All the things successful businesses do. What's our business strategy going to be? We focused on all those things. I didn't have room or time for this culture stuff. It was just noise. If you'd asked me to define culture back then, I probably would have said something along the lines, I really don't have time for all this touchy-feely, this hippie sitting around a campfire singing Kumbaya stuff. We just don't have a place for it. But something happened. Something changed. So think about this, 28 years later, standing on a stage in front of 700 people talking about culture. Not only have we done that, but we've been able to achieve greatness with our organization over the last decade and a half that we never thought was possible, never dreamt. For the last 6 years in a row, we have been selected as one of the best places to work in Rhode Island. An accomplishment that measures the strength of your culture and the engagement within your organization. And we rate off the chart in those areas. So what changed? What happened? Well, I think what happened is that as we started to grow as an organization, and we started looking at where we're trying to go, and we added more and more people, we found you can't grow an organization until you handle and understand how people operate and how they come together and work. You really have to understand that, and the glue that holds those people together is culture. So by fact, for us to continue to be successful, we had to really focus on how do we create a culture that brought all these people together, held them together, and helped us grow our organization as we move forward. Now, when I looked at culture back then, I didn't look at it as some technical mumbo-jumbo definition like Chris provided us with. I looked at it as simply a way of life, the way we do things. And when I look at this way of life has a set of rules and parameters that define what we do and who we are. Now, when we think about this way of life, what's really interesting about it is no one really comes out and says our culture is going to be A, B, C, and we all start executing to a plan. Culture doesn't work that way, does it? I think culture, when you look at culture, it happens kind of organically. And if you think how culture is replicated across the organization is that we basically pass it down from person to person. Someone new joins the organization. We communicate with them. We actually demonstrate our behaviors on a day-to-day basis. And often people start imitating what they see. And that's how culture grows and evolves in an organization. I fundamentally believe as a leader, to be a successful leader of a business like Atrion, or businesses like some of you own in the room, or if I'm a department leader or a team lead, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's home, we have to focus on how we actually develop culture. We have to take a conscious action. We have to be intentional about what we do. We have to design our culture. We don't let it have an intentionality, and we don't let it run by default. So we focus on creating culture. That's what great leaders need to do. As I mentioned, culture replicates itself by passing it down from person to person. And it's done through three ways: the way we communicate, the way we behave, and through imitation. That's how we replicate culture in an organization. So think about a new employee coming into your organization. How did they actually understand the culture? It's by what they see, what they hear, and what they observe on a day-to-day basis that allows them to incorporate that. I want to share a story with you. It's about 3 monkeys. So 3 monkeys are placed in a cage. Researchers then lower a banana into the cage. And as one monkey sees this banana and starts to go for it and reach for it, the researchers spray the other 2 monkeys with water. They do this over and over. Anytime a monkey reaches for the banana, they spray it with water, the other 2 with water. After a while, the monkeys become conditioned so that when someone reaches for the banana, they actually try to stop that other monkey. They attack the other monkey. And this goes on and on and on, and it's replicated over and over and over again. Eventually, the researchers have said, let's change this up. What if we put a new monkey into the cage? What would happen? So they take one of the original monkeys out, they put a new monkey in. As soon as that new monkey sees that banana, what do you think he wants to do? He wants to reach it, so he goes for it. What do the other 2 monkeys do? Attack it. And it does this over and over and over again. Eventually, the researchers can replace all 3 of the original monkeys with brand new monkeys, and the behavior continues. The culture, the way of life continues. And they can do this forever. So let me ask this question. Have you ever been a new monkey? I know some of you have been new monkeys. Some of you work for me, and I know you're new monkeys in our organization, so you can laugh a little bit about that. Yeah, I saw someone over here mimicking it. That's awesome. You can see a lot from this stage. I don't know if that came out the way I wanted it to. It sounded better in my head. But we've been that new monkey. Haven't we joined organizations or been a member of a new team where we got involved in something? And we ask that question. Why do you do it this way? Because it seems so stupid, right? And what do they tell us? It's the way it's always been done. It's the only way to do it. That's the way I was taught. That is culture replicating the bad behaviors of the processes and procedures we do on a day-to-day basis. If we want to create a stronger culture, we need to understand that how culture is replicated, but also to be able to break the cycle of that replication. Because we don't want to be emulating and imitating the bad things. We want to move things better. So an interesting thing is that every company, every organization, every family, every team, every department has its own unique culture. No 2 companies have the exact same culture. What I love what's happening right now in the industry is that there's a lot of books in the last decade that have been written about culture and how to use culture to grow your business. The challenge with it is everyone then reads the Google book and they try to copy what Google's doing. What Google's doing only works for Google because that company is really a reflection of the people that make up Google. Your company is different. You're made up with different people, different things, different ideas, different beliefs. So how can you be the next Google of the world? Can I take ideas and concepts and incorporate them? Absolutely. But I can't become the next Google. I can't mimic them. We have to create our own. So when we think about culture, the second concept I want you to think about, so replication was the first. The second concept is that there's two types of culture. There's a formal culture and an informal culture. Formal culture is all the rules and procedures. These are the HR policies and practices. These are my benefit programs, my compensation plans. It's my annual reviews. It's the way I deal with performance issues. It's all those things. It's all my benefits, holiday pay, holidays, sick days, vacation days. All those things make up the formal part of the process. The informal is the organic. This is what we talked about in the Tale of the Three Monkeys. This is the organic part of what we do. Which one do you think is stronger, formal or informal? Raise your hand. How many of you guys think formal is the most powerful part? Okay, let's see your hands for the other, informal. Okay, I'm looking for every hand here. So I saw some of you guys didn't raise your hand. Okay, right over here, raise your hand, look up, okay. Here, okay, there, excellent. Informal is the most important part. This is why leaders can't dictate culture. We actually have to be able to influence culture and help it shape it, but not control it. We can't mandate what culture is. If we do, the informal part of this fights against it. A good example of the difference between formal versus informal is around a simple event that occurs. Most organizations on an annual event have some kind of either holiday party or a company outing, annual meeting. That's a formal process. So at Atrion, we have a holiday party that happens at the first couple of weeks of January. And we invite all our employees and their spouses to this event, and it's a very formal process. However, a few days before the holiday break, there's an informal portion that happens. We go to Boston Billiards, we go to some bar, 100 people descend on that place, we have a grand time. It's all informal. There's no master invite, there's no email, there's no coordination, there's no tickets to buy, there's no dress code. It just happens informally. The difference between formal and informal. Informal is a lot more powerful in our organizations. Every organization has its unique culture. Just like every city, town, I'm from Maine, so rural district has its own culture. So I want you to just think about the differences. I moved here in 1985 to Rhode Island. And the differences between Newport, Warwick, Cranston, for all of us from Cranston in a room, and Woonsocket was like I went to 4 different countries in a span of 20-minute drive. It was amazing. But think about this. Think about the difference in the culture between Providence, Rhode Island, Boston, New York, even LA. Is there a difference when we go from those cities, the cultural experience that we have? I've never been to a city that has the exact same footprint or fingerprint. It's all unique. And it even gets worse if I go from, say, Providence, Rhode Island to Guadalajara, Mexico. Isn't that even more of a cultural shift? So speaking of Guadalajara, I want to tell you a story. Me and 2 amigos decided to take a business trip to Guadalajara, Mexico. We had a few moments of downtime on this trip, and I decided that during those moments we were going to do a grand adventure. So I went to the front desk, I talked to them about what's available for 3 men with a few hours to kill to do in Guadalajara, Mexico. They gave me a whole list of suggestions. Finally, I said, we're going to do something awesome. And so basically what I did is I basically had my destination in hand. Now my next thing was I had to convince my 2 friends to follow me. As we did this, I asked one friend, I said, would you mind going to this small town a few miles away? And it's 25 miles away to be exact. He said, sure, what everyone else wants to do, I'll do. I'll go with the majority. I said, great. I counted that as being on board. The second person I asked, I said, we're looking to go to a small city about 25 miles away. Instead of saying, yes, I'm on board, or, I'll go with the flow, he said, is it safe? Of course it's safe. Then he asked, how are we going to get there? Taxi. How are you going to get back? Taxi. So we talked about this, and I really applied my super duper leadership persuasion skills at this point in time. Or I think what happened is they realized that if we lost him in Mexico, some people would be very upset with them. So they went along the ride anyway. So we were on our journey. We were about ready to start. So we started by hunting down a taxi cab. We climb into the car, the taxi cab. I'm in the front seat. I look over the driver and I try to explain to where we're going. Realize in 2 seconds, speaks no English. We're off to a good start. Now, on the flip side, I speak Spanish. I know hola, and that's about it. So I handed her a card that had the name of the town that was on it because I couldn't pronounce it. None of my colleagues could either. So I gave her the card. She nods at me. Next thing you know, we're zipping through the streets of Guadalajara. We're in this car driving around. All of a sudden, she starts speaking to me in Spanish, like a 900 miles an hour. I have no idea what she says. And I look at my friends in the back. They have no idea what she says. And I just shrug my shoulders. So she sees the look over my face. She sees me doing what a typical American would do when they're in a foreign country and don't understand the language. We speak slower and louder and louder. She still didn't understand what I was trying to say to her, and I didn't understand her. She picks up the phone, she calls someone, and she hands me the phone. I start talking to this person that speaks English just a little bit better than she did, but I understand he's trying to find out where exactly we want to go in this town. So I talk to him for a few minutes, and I try to explain to him, and he says, okay, let me speak to the driver. They talk for a few seconds, and we're off. Now, at this point in time, my friends and I are starting to begin to worry. My friends are actually talking about maybe going back. Because we've been driving for about 15 minutes, and it doesn't seem like we're getting any closer to our destination. There's no signs for this town. We're zipping in and out of streets. Someone in the back mentions, this seems like a bad scene out of a horror movie. You know when we talk about when three gringos get in a cab and no one ever sees them again? So, spoiler alert here, we all survived. But my friends were seriously talking about going back to the hotel. And I said, we're persevering, we're going on. A few more minutes go by, and all of a sudden she starts speaking to me in Spanish again. I have no idea what she's saying, but I'm listening intently because there has to be one word I understand. Finally, she says, chica. I said, chica, I know chica. Si, chica, chica. Yes. My friends start chanting it in the back, chica, chica. She continues to speak in Spanish for a few minutes. And I have no idea what she's saying. I'm just nodding and smiling at her and doing all those things that you do as a good American, not to be rude in a foreign country. Finally, someone in the back says, I think she just said the word dancing. So me being bold, I said, dancing girls? Dancing girls? And I'm thinking this. As I look over at the driver, as I'm saying dancing girl, she has this huge smile on her face and she's nodding at me like this. I think she's thinking about this. So my wife is here. We didn't go there. About this point in time, when I realize there's confusion and we start saying no, 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 I start trying to explain to her where we want to go. And somehow, with my limited Spanish vocabulary, I was able to convince her, I think, that we wanted to go to the plaza. That's simple. So as I'm doing this, talking to her, I start to realize that, you know what? I left all my Mexican pesos in my room. All I have is American money on me. I asked my friends real quickly, do you have any pesos? They said, no, you have all the pesos. Whew. We finally pull up to the taxi stand at the corner of the plaza. We jump out of the car. I fish in my wallet for a $20 bill. I hand the $20 bill to the woman. She's looking at the $20 bill like this and looking at us and looking at this. I don't know if she thinks she got a raw deal or not, but we just quickly walked away. Now, the good news is, first of all, we survived. The good news, the taxi rider was only $12 in American money, so she did get a good deal. We enjoyed the plaza. We absorbed some of the local culture and had a fine experience. And no, there were no dancing girls of any type that we saw on that trip. So like my Guadalajara story, when you think about cultures, whether it's a corporate culture or a country that you go to visit or a new city, cultures can be, some of them can be safe and comfortable. So I go from Providence to Boston, it's pretty safe and comfortable. Some of them can be exotic and exhilarating, like our Guadalajara experience, and some of them can be actually downright dangerous and toxic. Do you guys agree with that? That there are organizations that you could join or be part of that are toxic and may not be best for your career or your well-being, mental well-being? One of the lessons I learned during this trip, that there are three types of people, or archetypes of people, that respond to culture. So I want to explain the first one with you. So the first person I refer to is what I call a climber. And this is a story I told you. I was a climber. I was ready for that adventure. I'm that first mover. If my friends said they weren't going, I was going to that town on my own, and I would have had a grand time. We have those kind of people in our organizations. They're ones that you can give the hardest task to, and they'll figure a way to get it done with no time, no resources. They just make it happen. We all have climbers in our organizations that we deal with. It represents about 10% of the workforce, people that are climbers. And so whatever happens in our culture, what happens in our business, they respond and help us move to change. The second archetype that we have is what I call a camper. These people are not all that engaged necessarily in the way the business is running. They don't necessarily take risk. They have a tendency of going with the flow or staying with status quo. What's great about campers is that when they do start to move, they move in herds. So what happens is when movement of the campers occurs, momentum gets created. Then the third type of archetype we have is what I call captives. Have you guys ever seen a captive in the workplace? Aren't they amazing? Because they can become a victim for everything, right? They have a tendency, you think they have a tendency of being positive or negative? A little bit more negative than positive. Do you think they can be cynical? Skeptical? Now, do you think cynicism and skepticism is important quality to have in an organization? Yeah, because I'm a climber. I can be Pollyannish. Everything is optimistic. Everything is perfect. Everything will work its way out. We do have to have that voice that the captive brings to the table. But the problem is sometimes captives actually anchor in. And it becomes a battle to move them. They're the most resistant to change. They're the ones that always pine about how the old culture was always better than the new culture and where we're trying to go. So there's three archetypes, and it's important as leaders we understand that these three archetypes are people. When we're talking about culture, we have to affect all three of them in different ways. Do you think we have to spend much time to actually get a climber to go do something? Usually a climber, we just mention it, and they're off and running. How about captives? Do we have to really spend much time with captives, that 10% of the organization that wants to stay back? It's probably not worth our time and energy. There's not a lot I can do as an individual leader to actually move those people. It's harder. There's some things I can do to make it a little bit more better, but it's very hard. Where I want to spend my time is the campers that are in the middle. If I could focus on shifting the middle even a little bit, do you think my organization or my team or my department becomes a little bit better? And if I can start to move a number of them, 10%, 15%, 20% of the people in the middle, do you think I can accelerate the change, accelerate the creation of the culture that we want? The answer is absolutely. The challenge that I see that happens with a lot of organizations that are looking at culture, looking at increased performance of their organization and teams, they think the only way to do this is by hiring the best people, the best of the best. They want to hire climbers. They want to hire, A-plus players. They want the superstar. They want the rock star in their organization. Do you think that strategy works? I could populate my company with what I would say on paper are all A players. But eventually, they're going to stratify themselves into climbers, campers, and captives, just like any organization. So just hiring the best talent doesn't solve the problem. It makes some of your decisions easier when you hire better quality talent versus non-quality talent, but it still has problems. Have we ever seen a sports team that tried to buy their way into a championship? They go out and hire the best talent on the market, and they pay hundreds of millions of dollars. What I think is amazing is how few of them actually win it all at the end of the day. It does happen, but it's more than just the people that makes it work when it does work. It's about the culture and the glue that holds those people together. So have you ever hired anyone or sat down through an interview with someone and said, this person would be awesome for my company, for my team? And then you bring them into your organization and they suck? You're like, what the hell was I thinking? How didn't I see this in the interview? I did 15 interviews. I asked them all the questions I got off the internet. They passed with flying colors. What the hell? And at this point in time, you're stuck with having to deal with that issue. So hiring talent alone is not the issue. That's not how we control culture. That's not how we create great change and great performance. It's more than that. It's about how we build culture. And we need to use culture as the glue to take those great people we have on our teams and actually bring them together so they can work as one team towards a common goal and a common outcome for the organization. So, Think about culture in your organization. If as a leader, the CEO of the company, if I do nothing, I make the conscious choice to do nothing, my company is going to have a culture. I don't know what it's going to be. It's going to be managed entirely by the informal process. I'll have a culture. If I hire the right people, maybe that culture is successful and accidentally I become a good company and I achieve the objectives I want. But most often that doesn't happen. Because if you think about it, the climbers, it's only 10% of your organization, 10% of your team are the climbers. I'm leaving 90% of that up to chance with people that are campers that want to stay where they're at or they want to stay at status quo. Am I going to be able to grow with that? So we need to really think about how we change it. So culture is going to happen. As a leader, I have to take some conscious effort to create this. If I can create an unbelievable culture, one that's amazing, one that's healthy, one that's strong, environment that moves us forward, do you think my outcomes become better? That I can achieve more, accomplish more, not only financially but socially as well? Absolutely. The problem with this and why it's hard to do, culture is something that it's hard to see at times, isn't it? It's kind of intangible. I can't walk in and pick up culture. 6 years ago when we created Always On, we had no concept of what we wanted to create for an organization. But over 6 years and 5 events, there's a culture that we created in here. We shaped some of it intentionally to create the right experience by bringing in great speakers, talking about high-level topics. But you guys add to the culture that happens here. When I walk out there and I can feel the buzz, that's you creating the culture. It's hard to see and hard to understand this at times. The way I equate this is like a fish to water. And I want to share a parable with you. This one day, these 2 fish are swimming along. And this older fish comes swimming by in the other direction. And he looks at the 2 fish and he says, "Good morning, boys. How's the water?" The 2 fish swim on, and a few minutes later, one fish looks at the other and says, "What the hell is water?" We think about this, what the hell is culture? We don't really see it. It's really hard to manage. For us as humans, we breathe air. How often do you stop and think about the air you're breathing? You guys thinking about it right now? Maybe because I'm mentioning you're thinking about it. But take that air away, how much are you thinking about breath? I do a lot of scuba diving. When you're 120 feet down and there's no oxygen, and your tank is running on low and it's hard to breathe, you're concerned and all you can think about is oxygen. I do a lot of hiking at high elevations. When I'm at 14,000, 15,000 feet, in this October when I climb Kilimanjaro, I'm at 19,000 feet, I'm going to be thinking a lot about air or the lack of air. So when culture is good, we don't really think about it, but when it's bad, it's all we can think about. It's all consuming. Have you ever seen when there's a culture problem in an organization and all everyone can talk about is how bad it is? As leaders, we have to understand we can control that. We have the ability to control that. Before we move on to other things, I want to just kind of quickly walk through how do you actually measure and think about culture. There's really 2 dimensions I want you to think about. The first is the strength of the culture. And what I mean by strength of the culture is how pervasive is the culture across the organization. I've seen some organizations have an amazing culture around sales, but the rest of the organization is toxic. Have you ever seen that? It's not very pervasive. It's one team that has this great culture. The rest of the organization doesn't have it. So when I look at this, it's how pervasive is it across the organization? Is it that the culture is in the hands of the king and a few of his followers, and that's all that manages the culture, that all represents the culture, or is it everyone? A characteristic that I think is really important about culture that has strength to it is the fact that people in the organization are willing to defend and fight for that culture. So I want you to think on a little somber note for a second. Many of us in this room can remember the tragedy that happened on September 11th. Can any of us remember what happened shortly thereafter on September 12th? Did you feel how the United States of America came together as a country? How the strength of our culture actually bonded together for a few moments? We saw it happen up in here in the Northeast when the Boston Marathon bombings happened. They actually came up with the word Boston Strong. We were defiant. We were not going to allow ourselves to be fearful of some random act of violence. That's a strong culture coming together to fight for what they've created. On the flip side, the other dimension is the energy level of an organization. Have you ever walked into an organization that you felt just positivity? How about this event? When you walked upstairs and went up the escalator and got here, did you feel the energy, the buzz that existed, that positive energy? There are companies that exude this. I can walk into my business any day and I can feel that positive energy. And it's not just the paintings on the wall and the color, the furniture that we have. That's all cool. But it really comes down to the energy that the people bring into the office on a day-to-day basis. Do they want to be there? I've also walked into organizations where you just want to shoot yourself. It's like I'd rather spend time in a funeral home than I would at that office space. I think we've all seen that kind of environment. So energy is a measure that we can look at, can be really vibrant and energetic, or can be very toxic. I grew up in Maine, and I grew up near the Androscoggin River. I'm not sure if anyone knows the Androscoggin River, but it's the third largest river in the state of Maine. When I was a kid growing up, it was one of the most polluted bodies of water in the United States of America. It was a river that ran from New Hampshire all the way down to the coastline, and it was along the paper production mill line. There was probably 30 mills along that river. And since the early 1900s, they just took the waste that they created and make it into production of paper and dumped it into the river. And it didn't matter what it was. It could be arsenic, it could be mercury, it could be cyanide, it could be chlorine, it could be anything they would dump into the river. So by the time I was a kid in the 1960s, the water was so toxic that you couldn't touch it. It would cause skin irritations, rashes, and actually literally cause burns on your skin. You couldn't boat in the water. You couldn't fish in the water. The fish were so toxic, if you actually ate one fish, you would die. There were so many heavy metal toxins in that fish that would kill you. One fish. This didn't happen overnight. This happened because of 60 years of pollution just being dumped into the water. That negative energy in an organization is what we dump into our businesses that create pollution. Toxic environments don't happen overnight in our companies. They happen over a long period of time by us not controlling the energy level. The good news is that almost 45 years later, EPA came in, put controls in, they started cleaning up the water. You can actually now swim in the Androscoggin River. It doesn't burn you. You can fish in it. You can kayak and canoe in it. They've cleaned it up to what now represents the state of Maine, that clean, environmental friendly state. I don't know if I'd still eat the fish out of it. I don't know if I trust that, but it's gotten much better. So our organizations, we can turn them around, but it takes a long time to fix an organization once it becomes very toxic. I believe that toxicity in an organization, or that bad culture that we've all experienced before, has an impact on the success of business. And I want to share with you kind of a real interesting statistic. Out of all the new companies that get started in the first 5 years of their life, 80% of them go out of business. So 80% of all new companies go out of business. So if 100 started today, 80 go out of business, 20 survive. Over the course of the next 5 years, 80% of those businesses that survive will go out of business, leaving 4% that will survive beyond 10 years. And that doesn't mean they're healthy. It just means they survived. I believe one of three things have damaged those companies. Bad strategy, wrong product mix, wrong category, wrong business model. Number two, fiscal management. There's a lot of business owners that don't know how to run businesses and how to balance it and how to do it fiscally responsible. And third is culture. And I actually think culture is the worst one of these because I can see the other ones on my P&L. I can see them more tangibly on a day-to-day basis. I don't see the cancer that's building my organization that's actually going to tear me down. So as I mentioned earlier, every culture is unique. And not every culture is for every person. I've interviewed companies back when I was looking for jobs back a long time ago, where I interviewed them, and after I was done the interview, I wanted no part of that organization. I didn't want to join them because I could just feel the culture didn't fit for me. There were certain things as an individual I was looking for. So when we have organizations, we want to be clear on what our culture is, so when we hire people, they fit the culture. We know which ones fit in there. But every culture becomes unique. And this uniqueness allows these companies to focus on better outcomes. I want to share with you 4 companies. I did a lot of research. I looked at about 20 different companies, and I selected 4 that have amazing cultures that help them achieve amazing outcomes. And I looked at the Amazons and the Googles and the Facebooks and those kind of companies, and some of them will make this list. But the first one I want to start with is one that was a complete shocker to me when it came up. I said, really? And I had to look into it a little bit more. The first one that came up that I want to profile here is Walmart. How many of you guys know Walmart? If you listen to the papers in the last few weeks and months, they've been under a lot of scrutiny for some of their practices around how they handle people. For me as an employee working for Walmart, I probably wouldn't be that happy. I probably wouldn't get the fulfillment. I have higher aspirations than being a greeter at the front door at Walmart, even though sometimes I wish that could be the case, right? It'd be a lot less stressful, but I think I would find stress there. So in the Walmart case, what's really amazing about Walmart, imagine this, a small retailer becomes the world's largest retailer. Their full focus in life is to be a cost leader. Do you think their culture supports being a cost leader at every aspect of what they do? Isn't it congruent with everything they do to how they compensate their employees, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent? It may not be. Some of you guys may not run out of here and go apply for a job at Walmart. It may not be for you. But for some people, that's a job. And it's something they can be part of. Just imagine they could actually fix the people problem. Imagine what Walmart could actually become. They're $500 billion, more than that, they're $500 billion in size now. They could probably be $1 trillion organization if they could fix a couple of problems with their culture. But it's amazing culture. If we look at the next example, I absolutely love this one. Not only did they create a culture for their small coffee shop that grew into something much larger, but their culture expanded to their customer base. I hate Starbucks. I don't drink coffee, but every time I go to get my wife a cup of coffee there, I don't know how to freaking order it. And every time I say I want a large, they say, well, you want a venti or a grande or whatever it happens to be. Drives me freaking crazy. But I have people that can walk in there and go order 15 drinks, all different, and I have no idea what they say. It sounds like Chris doing his opening remark. Who would ever thought when we talked about remote access and working from home, that home meant Starbucks? I have people on my team, when I call them and they're working from home, they're at the Starbucks. It's like, why? But they extended their culture beyond that. They're a $17 billion a year organization. Is that pretty successful? They've actually created a third space. They went from almost an unrecognized brand to being one of the top recognized brands in the world. The next one, we've done some case studies at Atreon on this because they're so focused on the ultimate client experience and how to deliver that. Zappos, small online shoe retailer that focused their culture on delivering the absolute best client experience you could get in the online retail world. There's been case studies, there's been books written about this, created this fanatical culture about servicing their clients. This company was about $300 million valuation. They sold to Amazon for $1.2 billion. They basically, in 2 decades, went from nothing and almost out of business 10 times to being over a $2 billion a year industry. Last but not least, I think we all know this one. In the technology world, if you're like me, back in 1990, 91, and 92, as the market share for Apple computers was dropping, we predicted their demise. They won't last another 3 years. What happened? Steve Jobs comes back, he imprints a strong culture of innovation, challenging the status quo into the organization. We'll do a lot of things we'll talk about today to the organization. And they became the most valuable company in the world. From on the verge of being out of business to being the most valuable company in the world. So real quickly, when I look at outcomes, there are 3 ways that culture has an impact on outcomes. The first is on the people part of our business. With strong cultures, we have the ability to attract the best talent. It's easier to attract best talent. Your culture becomes like a magnet. It happens in a lot of different ways. We see it at Atreon. We have employees that refer, new employees for organizations. We have clients that come across, people they think should work at Atreon. They contact us. Our quality has increased as our brand and as our culture has gotten stronger. An interesting statistic to think about when we think about culture and how that actually works is that 87% of your employees in a strong culture want to stay in that culture. If you have a stronger or weaker culture, the number is much lower. People that actually want to stay, it's like in the 33% range. So strong culture creates longevity with your employees. The cost of losing an employee is about 1 to 3 times the salary. So $100,000 a year employee, we lose that employee that we don't want to lose. We always have employees we want to lose sometimes, don't we? It's $100,000 straight to the bottom line cost to your organization. The second area it helps is in performance. And we'll talk about performance in two areas. Companies that have strong cultures over weaker cultures see a 3 times growth in their profits. 3 times faster growth in their profits. Now that's an interesting statistic, but the one I really get excited about is client loyalty. Clients that have great cultures with engaged employees have 2 times the client loyalty of their peers that don't have that. At Atrion, this is something we care about. It's very near and dear to our heart. We measure client loyalty with something called Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score, clients complete a survey, you get a score. It's between a positive 100, which means they're really loyal, to minus 100, that they want to shoot you. A good score is 20. An average across all industries is about a 20. The IT industry, the industry that I'm in specifically, the IT services space, is about a 25, is an average score. From the IT industry as a greater whole, and we look at the manufacturing side of this, a good score is somewhere between 25 to 50. I think I have up here Cisco's score, which is a 50. Very solid score. Someone like a Ritz-Carlton would have like a 70 to 75 range. Atrion's, we've been doing this for 10 years now, we have maintained around a 70% over a decade. The last go-around that we just looked at before putting this event together, we were at just below a 72% Net Promoter Score. 3 times what the industry average for our industry by having a strong culture and strong employee engagement. Talking about employee engagement, a couple of things I want to share with you. At any point in time in your organizations, 31% of your team, the climbers, are actively engaged in moving your business forward. 18% of the people on your team are actually actively disengaged. That means they're doing things to not move your company forward. Not changing, all the negative things that we could think about that would happen with that. They're actively not engaged in moving your business forward. And if you notice, the biggest chunk is that middle, that camper space that we talked about. When we talk about culture and improving it, it's targeting that 51% to move that number. We want 31% to be larger. Every percentage increase on getting that has a direct connection to the bottom line. And what they see, companies that have strong cultures have a 2 times productivity performance improvement than companies that don't. So when most people want to change culture, they start at the tip of the iceberg. We go through, we paint our walls, we put new furniture in. We go to Successorities online and we buy a couple of posters and we frame them and put them on our wall. We create some slogans, we run around and we have a meeting or two and we pronounce these slogans. We focus on the tip. What we're going to talk about today is how do you focus what's below the surface. That is where true cultural change happens. Putting posters on the wall, creating slogans will not drive your company forward. It will not change your culture. You may get a little energy improvement, but it's not going to change what we're doing. So what we're going to talk about through the course of the rest of the day, and we have some amazing speakers. I'm just going to talk through these 5 really quickly. We're going to talk about what we call the 5 pillars of how you actually influence and control culture or create culture. So we're going to talk about the first one, which is vision. Vision is really kind of a directional thing. It tells us where we're going. What I find in most cases with most business, when I ask them, what's your vision? They give me things that are outcomes or goals or objectives. I talk to a lot of CEOs and I say, what's your vision for your company? And they'll say something along the lines of, my vision is to be $100 million or $1 billion in revenue. Is that a vision? No, it's a goal. It's an objective. It's a strategic milestone that I want to reach. And those are important in organizations, but that's not a vision. It's not something that's aspirational, something that inspires people to give their heart and soul to the organization, to become engaged. Chris Poe is going to talk today about how you actually create vision that creates that inspiration, that motivates your team to move the middle of the organization. Next, we want to talk about purpose. This is one of my most favorite part of this conversation. What we do on a day-to-day basis in our offices is really hard work, isn't it? I don't know if you're like me, but I go nonstop more than my 40 hours a week. I work nights, I work weekends, I'm constantly on. That takes energy, doesn't it? What if the work we did had no purpose? It was not meaningful to me, it wasn't meaningful to anyone else. Do you think I have energy? I'm giving my best game every day? One of the reasons why people are not engaged and actively disengaged, there's no meaning in what they do. The way we do this as an organization, we create purpose. At Atreon, the purpose we created is something called having a positive impact. Everything that we do, we have a direct, straight line connection to having a positive impact. When I create an apprenticeship program and I bring in new people off the street that don't have a lot of experience in technology or in business or professionally, and I put them through a year-long program to make them incredible engineers for our organization, the people that manage that work their asses off. The reason why they do it is because they get satisfaction out there changing people's lives. The average starting salary of a person that was working before they came into us is about $12 an hour with our apprenticeship program. And when they come join our program, they almost get a 25% increase above that. They start at $16 an hour. When they graduate the program, they're at $20 an hour. And as they stay with it and perform, they can be at the six figures before long. Doesn't it have a huge impact on their lives? So we talk about this. Having purpose and giving people a reason to do things is really, really important. I have to be able to drive everything I do back to this straight line purpose. You're going to hear Dave Ramsden talk about values. You've heard us talk about values at every single Always On event that we've ever done. Values, I think, are the most important tool that we have as leaders. It helps us frame and make every single decision that we make. If we know our values well, we can vet important decisions, making sure that we're never disappointed with what we make. It may not always be the best choice, but I'll never regret that I made the wrong choice. Values drive that. It's important that organizations have values, and they're more than just slogans written on a piece of paper, on our website, on the back of our business cards or our badges. We need to own these, and we need to live them and breathe them every single day of our lives. The fourth area I want to talk about is amazing people. You got to surround yourself with amazing people. I'm going to share a quick story about my personal life. When I was a kid, I lived in rural Maine. There wasn't a lot of people around. I had this one friend that lived about a mile from my house. And we were together. We were like this. We were the same age. We were about the same height and weight. We were the runs of the class. We weren't the most popular people in our class. So we hung together all the time. And through elementary school, if you remember your best friend in elementary school, you were there. Sleepovers on the weekends. You were in every class. You were on every recess. We were together like that. 7th grade happens, and we go to middle school. And now we're no longer in that homeroom class. We're in different classes throughout the days. Our lives get busier with sports and Boy Scouts and other things that we had going on. And we don't see as much of each other. Somewhere around 7th and 8th grade, my friend Alan started getting into things that weren't healthy for him or for anyone. And I had made some decisions in my life, my values. There were certain things I was never, ever going to do. But Alan was experiencing those things, and he tried to pull me along with him because he was having fun doing them, and he wanted me to join in that fun. I had to make a decision to say, time out, this is not for me. I'm not going to do that. We go to high school, everything's kind of distant. We say hi to each other in the hall, but we really don't talk to each other anymore. I made the decision that we're not going to be friends. During our graduation period in our senior year in high school, one night Alan went to a party, had a little too much to celebrate, and decided he was going to climb over a 20-foot fence. He climbs over that fence, climbs down the other side, decides he's going to climb up this iron tower. As he climbs up this iron tower, he grabs a high-voltage wire and electrocutes himself and dies. When I think about this, in life we surround ourselves with people that hold us back or could hold us back. We want to surround ourselves with people that move us forward. We want to bring in people to our organization that are better than we are because we need them to help us move forward in the organization. We cannot hang on to the Allens in our life. If I didn't let go with Alan, because of the way our relationship was, I would have been the first one over that fence. I would have been the first one up that tower. And I wouldn't be on this stage today. So we got to surround ourselves with amazing people of all forms. Amazing people, one of the qualities I think make them work is they're resilient. They identify challenges. They don't let challenges stop them when they find ways to overcome those challenges. You need those kind of people around you at all levels. People above you, people that are peers to you, and people that are below you. Last but not least, the area we're going to talk about is what we call wow moments or wow experiences. There are 1,000 ways to do anything that we want to do in life. And one of the things I talk to our teams, how can we do things that are very common? Would you agree an event like this is a very common event? People have speakers that come in, they have a stage, they come out and present information. We put a lot of thought in how do we make this the most memorable experience for our attendees. It's about the experience that we create. So it's doing those common things in what we call an uncommon way. Many companies that I talk to on a day-to-day basis, especially in the mid-market, the smaller to mid-market companies, when they hire a new employee, they basically throw them in a room for the first 4 hours of their employment, they fill out a bunch of paperwork, then they throw them to the wolves. There's no onboarding. That's the first experience an employee has in your organization. Why wouldn't we want to make that first week of their employment with us unbelievable? Indoctrinate them in our culture. Make it so when they come in, they walk out every day of that first week, they're excited about what they're doing. They're excited about the opportunities they have in front of them. So we're going to talk a lot about how to create those wow experiences. Last but not least, I do a lot of speaking, a lot of public speaking. And I talk about leadership, and I talk about culture. I talk about how do we make our organization better, how do we get more important outcomes. Almost invariably, after every one of these speeches I do, I have a bunch of people come home and ask me very specific questions. What did Atreon do? But invariably, I have one type of person that always comes up. This person comes up to me and says, Tim, everything you said resonates with me. That's me. That's who I am. And they're emphatic about it. When you said this, that's me. Then they say, I wish I worked for someone like you or a company like Atreon, because the company I work for sucks. Now, they may not say the word sucks, but that's what they say in terms. And they'll go on for like 10, 15 minutes talking about it. During that conversation, I'll ask them questions like, well, how long have you worked for this company? It's like 14 years. Every time I ask the question, I've worked there for 14 years. So in my head, I'm starting to put these pieces together. The company sucks, I've been there 14 years, and I have to ask, well, how long has your company sucked? And it says about 3 months after I started. It's something ridiculous like that. And I question myself, if your company sucks so bad, why are you still there? Then I start to equate this. I say, in my mind, and this may be wrong, but I do this sometimes. Sometimes I can be a little wrong. I sit there and I say, if a company is really a reflection of the employees that work there, and your company sucks, doesn't that mean you kind of suck? And I get stuck with that model. It's in my mind. What I think is amazing is that every person in your company, you, the people in this room, have the ability to influence your culture. You are culture. I am part of the culture of my organization. I have a responsibility to help make that culture the best I possibly can make it. So my suggestions to them is, why don't you try to change the culture? Why don't you try simple things? Why don't you actually be positive instead of negative? Instead of talking to me about 15 minutes about how bad your company is, why don't you find ways to talk about and make your company positive, to make it more effective? So I want to leave you with one last thought. Culture will help you improve the outcomes of your organizations, your departments, your teams. If you focus on culture, I guarantee you'll see significant improvements in the outcomes you achieve. But it comes down to what you choose to do or what you choose not to do. So thank you. Have a great day.